few days, so why bother?
That's right. And in some cases we've heard of other farms, not just crayfish farms, other farms where as soon as the calf is born, it is knocked on the head, or it's throat is cut or whatever and just left for the slinky truck to pick up. So that's part of the problem. Most farmers are very good at this. I mean, I myself grew up on a dairy farm. Part of my job when I was a 10-year-old was to feed the calves, and we were proud of that, and we made sure we did a good job. We hardly had any die. And yet what we were seeing in the Crayford Farms operation is that dozens were dying every day and being piled up next to the shed for trucks to take away, or simply being buried. And this was a problem that had developed over some time. The management in place wasn't good enough and was under incredible stress, and what we saw was some fairly disastrous images, not just for Crayford Farms, but for the industry as well.
For the industry as a whole,
and for New Zealand's reputation. The other thing I find troubling about the Crayford Farms issue is that Fonterra knew that there were problems on that farm, and that's why Alan Crayford effectively was kicked off the Fonterra Shareholders Council after he'd been there for 6 years. But why was he there for 6 years to start with? We all knew that Alan Crayford was a loose cannon, that he was playing fast and loose with the environmental rules, that some of the things he was saying were extraordinary, and that there were problems there. Why didn't Fonterra act earlier? Also the banks, they have a lot of questions to answer here. Why did they lend this guy $200 million? They will pay for it with losses, given that the land is going to be worth less than the debts involved. And then finally, MAF had been told time and again that there were problems on Crayford Farms. Yet even in the example we cite, where the video showed incredible neglect, MAF were tipped off by the farmer who actually provided us the video, and then didn't turn up for 2.5 days.
Yes, they were told on a Friday and didn't get there till the Monday.
That's right. Yeah. And before they arrived, they rang up the Crayfish to say they were coming, who then proceeded to go around and slaughter a bunch of these dead and dying calves. Even though they'd gotten rid of the worst so that MAF couldn't see them, they still had to destroy a couple of dozen bobby calves. So,
did they try and hide them from MAF? What happened with those calves they slaughtered?
Well, we're not sure exactly, but they obviously wanted to remove the worst of the evidence before MAF arrived. But even then, MAF found some significant issues. The real issue here, and this is a question I'm challenging MAF on, is what is its approach to dairy farming? It has only 5 inspectors in the whole of the country. That's 1 inspector per 10 million animals. Now, they say their approach is to work with the farmers to make sure that the animals are looked after. And if that means not prosecuting, but coaching, if you like, the farmers to do better, that's their approach. But sometimes when you have repeat offenders, sometimes the only way to deal with this is to essentially to prosecute people and to put them out of business. Now, they've actually prosecuted Crayford before in 2006, but he was allowed to continue on.
This was on animal cruelty.
That's right. And there was a $200 fine, although to be fair to Crayford, he had to pay a couple $100,000 in legal costs. But he'd been convicted before, not just on animal welfare, but on environmental lapses again and again and again. And the powers that be in New Zealand, agriculture and in dairying, should have known. Dairy NZ, Fonterra, MAF and the banks should have known this was a problem and acted to stop the growth of this farm before it got out of control.
If you look at the broader industry, there must be a bit of disquiet being expressed. I mean, are farmers watching this case pretty closely?
Well, most farmers are obviously looking after their stock and they've got their operations under control.
Well, Fonterra's been very vociferous in the defence of the industry and saying, you know, the vast, overwhelming majority are good with their animal welfare.
That's right. And New Zealand dairy farms are rightly praised for being open, for being mostly pasture led, unlike in Europe and the States where you have cows in these huge barns. And it does make us look good when you see these pictures.
It's a big marketing tool, really,
exactly.
Isn't it?
And that's why this case is dangerous. When you have this video, which we put up on YouTube, available and is now being distributed through Europe, I've heard back through the internet that this is now being passed on to the dairy boards and animal rights groups in Europe. They're seeing this and going, well, how 100% pure really is New Zealand?
That's a bit disturbing, isn't it?
Yes, and that's an issue for New Zealand, and rightly so. But it's not just the Crayford Farms where we have an issue here. I'm particularly focused on the huge expansion of some of these large herd dairy farms in marginal areas. For example, there is an application before the Environment Canterbury at the moment to put over 20,000 cows into the Mackenzie Basin. Now this is right next to Mount Cook.
This is a very fragile country, isn't
exactly.
it?
Essentially it's a desert right now. They're going to do it with irrigation. Now that, frankly, I have some real questions about this. This is an area where they're going to need barns in winter for the stock to survive. They're going to need heavy supplementary feeding programs.
So it's more European
exactly.
system of raising.
Exactly, in one of our pristine alpine environments. And
I can't imagine the people of Canterbury, with their love of the high country, are going to let this one happen without putting up a pretty strong protest.
Well, you'd think so, and this is going to be one of these flashpoints in this big debate about the growth of New Zealand's large herd dairying,
Right.
which has been financed by debt and is built on the prospect of capital gains. We've seen it through Canterbury, mid to South Canterbury, through Southland, big expansions of these farms, and it is quite foreign to New Zealand's dairy farming culture. I mean, I grew up on a dairy farm with a couple of hundred cows.
Right.
Most New Zealand dairy farms are still relatively small operations. We're talking anything from 200 to 1,000 cows.
Right.
But these operations are often 1,000 plus cows, 2,000 cows, and they are run more like a business, as they should be, with corporate style management.